And there we go. We're live. Absolutely. And I'm just going to take a second to share this. So, everybody, bear with me as you're jumping on. Welcome, everybody.
All zero people.
Yeah, all zero people right now. Yes, they'll jump on in just a second. Um, I'm just going to share this to my Facebook live or to my Facebook wall, if the internet will allow me to do it. And we're back with our show, which is just a space to talk about questions that people have submitted.
Yeah.
So, before we get into the topic at hand, maybe what was our Christmas like?
What was it like?
Yeah, what was our Christmas like?
Oh, well, we have 3 young kids, so it was fun.
Yes.
We were exhausted as the
Yes.
parents, and the children's energy level was at 1,000
Yes, that's very
pretty
true.
much all day.
Yeah.
So I think that's a win.
Yeah, that is a win. That's
like
right.
that's what you want,
That's right. Yes, that is a win.
It was good.
I can't get this thing's not coming up, so just trying to share it to my wall. So as you jump on, please give the video a like, share the video, and we are going to be talking about the struggle with. Here we go. Able to share it. There. We're going to be talking about the struggle with second guessing what God would
God
say
has
to you.
said.
Yeah, being confident in hearing the voice of God is essentially what the topic of conversation is going to be today. So, Christmas was a bit of a gong show, and now, of course, getting things scheduled with where we just had in our provinces just announced that all schools are suspended or moving to home learning until at least January 17th. So, that makes scheduling these things a little more difficult because now we have 3 kids at home as opposed to 1 child at home. So it makes it a little bit more difficult. Good morning, Berta. Great to see you on. And I will be in your neck of the woods next month. So I'm going to be in Texas for 2 weekends. One weekend, the first weekend in Texas, in Lubbock, Texas, and the next weekend I'll be in Dallas, doing some stuff with streams and maybe with Remnant Radio guys. We might do some video stuff. So yes. So I was just chatting with your pastor Berta the other day, and really looking forward to being with you guys. So that's going to be lots of fun. So just as you jump on, like I had said, the topic we're talking about this morning, afternoon for us, morning for some, probably later afternoon for others, and we're going to be talking about the struggle with second guessing what you hear from God.
Do you want to read the question?
Yeah, sure. I'll read the question. That's a good idea. All of the topics that Erin and I are talking about are people that have asked us questions.
Yeah. So this was an email.
This was an email, yeah. And the person said, I struggle with second guessing myself after hearing from the Lord, especially if others who know me highlight an area they perceive that I need to work on or be careful about, when I would have already been hearing from the Lord in that area and taking the steps of obedience that he's been showing me. So it makes me question whether I'm missing what he is showing me or not obeying him fully or wholeheartedly. So let me know, by the way, for those of you that have jumped on, if the volume is okay. And I think it should be okay, but if we need to turn it up, we can. So that if you take a second and share the video as well, that'd be super helpful. Say that once more. So that's a struggle many people have.
It's a good question.
It is a good question, and it's a vulnerable moment, right? I feel like I've heard the Lord speak to me, but other people have come alongside and said, these are the things you need to be working on. And so am I hearing him accurately or not?
Yeah.
And it makes me struggle with, am I hearing him or not? And I think that, just the broader scope of hello, Sarah.
Hi,
It's good to see you. It's been a couple of weeks, and we're back at it. So and we'll be back with a live dream interpretation show also next week with my dad. So the broader conversation about hearing the voice of God, because obviously the topic at hand is about hearing the voice of God. Great to see you, Zothili. The first issue you have to deal with in that question about hearing the voice of God is really, what does the voice of God sound like?
Mm-hmm.
And so you can struggle with second guessing what he sounds like, or second guessing what he said to you.
Yeah.
But where we need to anchor ourselves in with that is a return back to, well, what does his voice sound like? What are the things that he talks about?
Yeah.
And how does his voice sound? And the place that we see that, of course, is in Scripture.
Yeah.
And you were saying just before we were going live that one of the issues, well, we both know people that should second guess what they're hearing.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah. Unsurprisingly,
yes.
I can think, and I mean, that said, I can look back in my own life in retrospect and go, yeah, you probably should have second guessed that.
Right, for sure.
And then you probably should have decided on, that's not God.
Right.
It's your own opinion. It's what you want. It's in your own head.
Yeah.
Not even opinion, but it's your own wounds.
Yeah. That's
informing how you feel God is speaking.
Yeah. So second guessing isn't necessarily bad, right?
Well, I think there's a reason that we see in the Psalms, we see David writing things like, God, show me my own heart.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
Excellent.
That is him second guessing.
Right.
He's going, this is what I feel in my heart. This is what I hear in my heart. But I realize I don't know my own heart.
Yeah.
So God, can you show it to me?
Yeah, for sure.
So I think biblically I think it's a way healthier, more mature space to go, I believe I'm hearing this. Let me just do a few checks.
Right.
Let me ask for some confirmation from some mature people.
Yeah.
Not looking for people who are just going to confirm.
Right.
Who, wise people who are going to be honest.
Yeah.
But
who I know will be, who I know will tell me. But back to
your point, though, can Scripture support it?
Yeah.
Right.
That's
like
right.
My example was like here in Canada, we had a federal election not that long ago, and not everyone is happy with the results. Right. And I've heard of people who feel,
imagine that.
Yeah, who feel
an election that was contentious.
Yeah, they've been led to pray, essentially against the current government. And, I have my issues with policy as well, but I know enough to go, God is not telling you to pray against your prime minister, right? He's not telling you to pray against your government.
Yeah.
Because the Bible tells us we're called to bless our enemies.
Yeah, that's right.
We're called to bless those who curse us. If you see the government or whoever it is, right, as an enemy, you're clearly called to speak blessing.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't mean you have to like everything or agree with everything, but it does mean that if you feel and you hear God saying, pray that this person disappears or this person's life falls apart,
sure. Yeah.
Scripture can't back that up, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like an easy example of going, because there are people that you genuinely think that, and it's like, that's why we have Scripture.
Yeah, that's right.
So then humility and maturity goes like, oh my goodness, I'm wrong. I need to rethink this.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you can go from there and you can learn from that and you can grow and mature.
I think it's Jim Wilder, great, he calls himself a neurotheologian. He's a neuroscientist, right, and a theologian at the same time.
Amazing term.
Yeah, I know. I really like Jim Wilder. I think it's him who says the truest test of discipleship is when we spontaneously love our enemies. But spontaneous love doesn't happen just because one day we decide to love.
It has to be in you deeply.
That's right.
Right? Like I think we think we're in control of our perceptions so much more than we are.
Yeah, that's it.
Like we have no idea how much our wounds and our pain is informing how we perceive.
Yeah.
Like I see that in myself. The more I become self-aware, the more I become of my wounds, I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yes.
We just, we think that we're so much more informed.
Yeah. So the more I see my fallibility, the more willing I am to question and hold loosely what I'm hearing the Lord say to me.
And that's why,
and subject it to the insight and wisdom of others that are with me. Yeah.
And that's why in churches and in like groups, that's why it's a red flag when you have a leader who
is unquestionable.
Yeah.
That's right.
And that doesn't mean that you have the right to question them if you don't have the relationship.
Yeah.
But if they have no one around them that they are accountable to or that's allowed to question them, and only they hear from God and what that's why it's a red flag. You need to go to your wise people.
Right. That's absolutely right. That one of the things saying that and looking at that, I was just reading in 1 Samuel where David, I'm going to butcher some of the context. David, as a leader, takes responsibility for things that are not really his responsibility. Yeah, and he could easily excuse some of the things that, some of the issues that fell to him as not something that he created.
Right.
And he could say, well, that's not my fault that happened. Right. But he takes responsibility. Things that Saul does, things that happen to the people, he takes responsibility for it. So he is willing to see himself in a lower position as opposed to, I'm this kind of person. I'm a leader. Don't bother me with these things. Right.
Right.
Yeah. So that's not his perspective as a leader. His perspective is not so much. I don't know that we would characterize David as constantly second guessing himself, but not holding himself in high esteem so that, so that he's infallible. Right. He recognizes I have to take responsibility for things that probably aren't my responsibility.
Right.
There's a humility and a tenderness in that.
And a care for the people.
Yeah. And a care for the people. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So great to see Dorothy. Great to see Annette. Hello, Annette. Hello, Renee. Wonderful to see everybody jumping on.
Lauren's up
there. Yeah. She said she likes our studio setting. And Erin painted this wall, this beautiful, beautiful wall. So I think she did a wonderful job. I'm just going to make the comments a little bit bigger here so it's easier for us to see. So I don't have to squint.
Can you not see them?
I can see them, but it's just not as easy as it used to be.
I know as a wife, I'm not supposed to laugh at you.
No, you are supposed to laugh at me.
Did it wrong again.
Well, one of the things I want to say in regards to hearing the voice of God and second guessing and what you've said, like looking back at Scripture, right? Scripture says to bless our enemies. And so if we're cursing our enemies in our prayers, then we think that God.
If you're going to look at Scripture, be prepared to listen to it.
Yeah, that's right. Scripture is. And
it's not. I say that because it's not always pleasant.
Yeah, for sure.
To be confronted with your own ineptitude.
Yeah, that's right.
Like it's not always nice to be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But it's important for growth.
We are much less aware of Scripture than we think we are.
Well, I think, and I think that's why you can have. I remember when we were in our Streams internship, someone asking John Paul, "How can you read the Bible every year? Like, don't you get bored?"
Sarah, look at Sarah. He needs glasses. Clearly.ca, great prices.
Clearly.ca, yes.
That's probably true. Yeah, but I read that.
It's undoubtedly
true. I read that. All right.
Yeah, after you bumped it.
After I bumped it up to the blind person level
the words are so big.
Well, the screen's pretty far away too.
It's not that far away. I'm just thinking I'm going a little bit away from. I forget what your topic was. There's a difference too between second guessing yourself and confusion.
That's a good point.
Like, let's make that distinction as well. Like, second guessing to me means, you're really just searching. You want confirmation. You want to make sure you're discerning, you're recognizing, like, maybe I just don't know. Maybe if you're just new to hearing God and knowing God, of course, Right. And if it's a big, depending on what you're hearing about,
right?
If it's a huge decision, you're moving or something like a huge move or shifting careers. That's a big decision. You want to know,
right?
But there's a difference between confusion,
right?
Right? Like you have people around you. There's like sowing confusion
Sure.
as opposed to trying to offer guidance. That's not the same thing.
Yeah.
And then with that too, scripture informs us, right? Like the enemy is the author of confusion.
Yeah.
And to me, I tend to notice confusion in my life if it feels chaotic. That's
Right.
how I know it's
Yeah.
confusion, and not just me needing more confirmation or needing to go to the Lord more.
Right.
And when I feel spinny after talking with someone, that's confusion. That
Yeah.
tells me there's chaos here, and God is not a God of chaos.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And you can't try to force a decision out of a place of chaos.
Yeah, like I remember.
I mean, you can do it, but it's really difficult and not recommended.
I remember coming back from, this was years ago, coming back from a very difficult conversation with a friend that was really struggling and spiraling into a lot of really bad stuff.
Right.
And you asked me how the conversation went, right?
Sounds
like something
Did
you
you
would
say fine?
No, that is an inside joke. It was good.
Yeah.
You asked me, and I tried to share with you how the conversation went, but it was very difficult to, because I just couldn't figure out what happened in the conversation.
Right.
I couldn't get a beat on it. Right. I was confused. I was left confused because of that person's chaos.
And blurry.
And so it was like, well, they said this, and I remember you pointing out a couple inconsistencies in what they had said. And I was going, oh yeah, I didn't even see that in the moment. Right. So I left their spiraled or confused. Right.
Yeah.
And they were talking about hearing God say this and hearing God say this and all that stuff. So so it was obvious in retrospect that person was not hearing God say what they were claiming that God had said to them.
Yes.
Right. And it left me confused.
And that's like another conversation of atmospheres.
Yeah.
Because that's when their chaos
impacted
your atmosphere more than your atmosphere of peace impacted them.
Right. So one of the things that has anchored me it was like, I don't know, it was probably 10 years ago or so. I started reading the Bible in a different way. And not just to read it, like I had read the Bible just to read. I read through the Bible. And when I wanted to read through the Bible, I read through the whole thing, but I didn't read it to get it, right? I read it to read it.
Yeah.
And at that point I had read it to study it, right? I'd parsed out the stuff and, learning how to study and looking at the words and the commentaries and the references and all that stuff. I'd done that, but it was a number of years ago. It was probably close to 10 years ago, where I thought, you know what? I want to see, in reading this, how does God speak when he speaks to someone? Because if Scripture is the record, in one sense, of God speaking, then I want to know what Scripture says about him speaking, right? And so that's been a journey in reading Scripture, just not even just studying it, but just reading it and going, well, how did he talk when he spoke, right?
Yeah.
And how did David talk about him talking? How did Abraham talk about his moments with the Lord? How did Moses talk about his moments with the Lord? How did Paul talk about his moments with the Lord? What did it sound like when he spoke to them? Is there any consistencies with that? And it dawned on me, just in the last couple of years, since I've been reflecting on it more and more, it dawned on me that the first, God obviously speaks because the first recorded utterance in Scripture is him, right? Let there be light. But what dawned on me is that God spoke without anybody needing to be there to hear it.
Right.
And so he was speaking without someone to hear him, outside of, Trinitarian within himself. So he speaks regardless of whether people will listen.
Right.
And we see that in Scripture, of course, where he speaks and people don't listen.
Yeah.
And Jesus even says that hearing they hear not, and seeing they see not. He talks about that in Matthew 13. And so there's the issue of God speaking and us not hearing, for sure, because God, within his nature, it's his nature to speak. But what we see most notably, looking even at the first interaction that God has with Adam and Eve, is that he gives them instructions for life, how to live and how things will go well with them. right? That's basically what he
Yeah,
says.
this is
Be
what you need
fruitful
to
and
do to have a
multiply. This is
successful
what you need to
life.
do to have a successful life, to
Mhm.
be yourself and to occupy the space I've given you.
Yes.
It's essentially what he says,
Yeah.
right? So he doesn't give them this grandiose promise of what everything's going to look like. And, you're going to do amazing things. You're called to be
Right.
the supernatural wonder of the world or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Which is what a lot of times what prophetic ministry ends up being is, I love how John Paul used to say, don't add hamburger helper to
Yeah.
your words, right? If someone's called to be a missionary, or if someone's called to be they're called to teach or lead or whatever, don't add things to that to make it sound better, right?
Yeah,
Like,
don't add your own
you're
thoughts
called
on
to the
it.
world,
Yeah.
to the nations, right? Where they
Also,
might be able to call
don't,
to a local church assembly.
Don't ask people for an international word.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
always remember
Yeah,
the
yeah.
person who did that to me.
Yeah,
Where's the word about my international healing ministry?
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I don't have one.
I don't have
I don't
a
know.
word
You need
for
to
that.
pray about that.
Yeah. Which was interesting, and I think you had just spoken over them about this cult intimacy that the Father had over them when they.
Yeah, I mean, this when I was
It was a long
brand
time
new.
ago,
Yeah, I was brand new into it. The word had nothing. It had everything to do with growing closer to the Lord. And they
Right.
just said, "Well, where's the word about my international healing ministry?"
Right. Right. So the way God speaks is knowing the way God speaks in Scripture is very helpful for going through that second guessing process.
Yeah,
Because
we need to go to Scripture first.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
like what I was
You were saying that
saying
beforehand,
before
right?
was what I've kind of a pattern I see sometimes is that we kind of look at step one is like hear the Lord all the time. So
Right.
always be listening to the Lord and listening to his voice. And then step two is like once you get that, then move on to learning your theology and
Right.
studying scripture.
Right.
Because it's a lot cooler to hear the Lord.
But
Like
yeah, right,
honestly, right? Like that feels more unique and we want to know about ourselves because we're all like self-absorbed to some degree.
Yeah, that's right.
We're trying to figure out our life. We want to know like all those things. We have questions, but that needs to be flipped.
Yeah.
It needs to be scripture first, hear the Lord second.
Yeah.
Because if you go the opposite way, scripture isn't just teaching you how to hear the Lord. Scripture is teaching us how to form ourselves.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. And so if you are listening to the Lord before you have basically cleansed yourself.
Right.
Of
it's the pure at heart that'll see God.
It's
Jesus
a pure
says that,
heart.
Right,
and
5.
I mean, I realize that's a journey.
Right.
But if you're trying to hear the Lord while you are still in sin, right? Like you haven't really met the Father yet. You haven't walked away or like repented. You haven't turned away.
Right.
All those things are still informing your thoughts and opinions.
Right.
It's very difficult to hear the voice of the Lord from that place.
Yeah. What I listen to is my own desires. And
and
David said, the troubles of, I think it's Psalm 22, the troubles of my heart are enlarged.
Yeah. Like, and I think, of course, I'm not saying God can't speak to us when we're in like a darker place or a place of confusion where we're not making good choices.
Yeah.
But even scripturally, when he does that, it's like a moment.
Right.
It's like a turn and like a revealing, and it's an opportunity for that person to step into something with him. It's not a day-to-day thing. Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
if the God you're hearing from always agrees with you.
Yeah,
it's a Tim Keller quote that I'm going to butcher, but he says, if God never disagrees with you, chances are you're not talking with God, you're talking with an idolized version of yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? Because I can't think of one mature person that I know who would say, oh yeah, God has never disagreed with me.
Yeah,
I'm always right. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Our thoughts and desires are the same.
Right.
Of course not.
Right.
And it's not to be a heavy, because he's a God of mercy.
Right.
And there's grace, and he understands. I think he looks to us when we're second guessing, and he's like, it's okay.
Right.
Yes, I'm here. And I have infinite amount of patience for you.
Yes.
You're going to get it. And if you don't get it, it's okay.
Right.
That's the other thing. It's not going to ruin your life.
Right.
I think I look back and I can see things where I genuinely believed I was following the Lord. I was doing my absolute best. And looking back, I go, yeah, that probably wasn't,
Right.
But was God still in it? Yes. Did he
Right.
abandon me? No. Did he still
Right.
love me? Yes.
Right.
There's something, we have to hold both.
Yeah, for
We
sure.
have to live in that tension of having a high standard, but also allowing us to be in our brokenness and in our humanity and figuring stuff out.
And that's why
It's a both and.
that's why second guessing what God says, or a better way of saying that is just holding it loosely.
Yeah.
Is not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because as I'm more aware of my own brokenness, I can hold that loosely and I can trust that the Father's speaking to me, but I'm very willing to be corrected.
Yeah, you can be open. I mean, it's like when people pray, like, they will ask the Lord, close the doors.
Right.
Or open the doors.
Right.
Or you put a foot in and does the door close? Okay, well then that's an answer.
Not hurt my foot.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
But even to this question, right, where this person, it kind of like she says, like God is saying this, and then I have friends bringing things up for me to work on.
Right.
And we don't know if those two things contradict.
Right.
But if they don't, it might just be two different things. And if they do contradict,
right,
that's where you would go, maybe you have like a person outside of that. Someone who's not like a close friend.
Mentor figure,
like a mentor figure,
spiritual mama or papa, something like that.
Exactly, that you can go to and get
someone I can look at by, a
help.
pastoral figure.
There's an absolute space for community in this conversation as well. It doesn't have to be only you.
Well, and hearing God's voice,
people.
Hearing God's voice should not be done in isolation.
Right.
It should be done communally.
Right.
I should be weighing the things that I'm hearing. And that's frankly, that's one of the things that got into such a mess with the prophetic is today is every person alive can make a platform just by logging into a social media account, right? They don't need to be accountable to anybody. They don't need to be weighing those words against
We're not
anybody.
all called to have a worldwide platform, global influence. Some of us are called to have a local church influence.
One of the functions of prophetic ministry is the flow of prophecy as it pertains to you open your mouth and words fill it. Right. That is that when you look at the words for prophecy in the Old Testament, that is one of them, is they kind of an unconscious, almost an unconscious speaking.
But to that, the Bible also calls us to be vessels that are pure.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
And so that's my point is that today we live in confusion when it comes to prophetic ministry, because someone can log on to Facebook, go to Facebook Live, and then they can just say, well, now I'm prophesying, the word of the Lord's coming to me right now, I'm prophesying and it's flowing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's not a function of prophetic ministry, right? But when you're talking about an international audience, those things need to be weighed. Those things need to be judged. And if you look at, like, think about this. This is something I don't think people think about this enough. The prophets in the Old Testament, they prophesied national words. Okay. But when they prophesied a national word, they didn't prophesy a national word in the moment. They wrote this out.
Right.
They wrote out multiple copies of it.
Yeah.
They prayed over this. They cultivated this. They crafted this.
Yeah.
And when these things came out, they were sent to the various different leaders in the land as formative words for the nation, right? Like you so often see,
off the cuff.
There's a time delay between the moment God comes and begins speaking and the moment that the thing's released.
Of course we don't understand, because we don't have time delays.
No, we don't have time.
We just clicked a button.
Yeah, right. I went live. Everybody's listening to me now, right? And so that creates chaos and confusion, because again, we're fallible.
Yeah.
We have our own agendas, right? I might say what you find in a lot of prophetic words that come out through Facebook Live and through YouTube Live and videos and stuff like that, is there's a lot of filler that sounds good, that attracts people, but that's because that's my way of thinking. That's not what God is saying.
And really, again, for us to discern, I always look at those and I go, does this sound like scripture?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And the words I decide to put aside, it's always because I'm going, this just doesn't I don't see this in
Right.
scripture.
For sure.
I don't see, and it's more conceptual.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily I looked at a verse that says this isn't right,
Right.
but it's who God's presented doesn't match the character
Yeah.
of the Lord, you
Yeah.
know?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like some of the prophetic words that had come out were like, they were adversarial, right? Like, um, God was pictured as speaking about all of the enemies that he was going to kill, right? And all of the, in essence, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they wouldn't have used that language. People wouldn't have used that language, but there's this, but what happened to the language of Jesus to comfort? What happened to the tenderness? Where did any of that go?
Yeah.
And there's like this assumption that God is invested in creating the political outcome you desire.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's all these internal assumptions we have that we filter what we hear through those internal assumptions, which means I have to be aware of those things. And the moment that I go, like, I know there's prophetic people that will speak about the word that they spoke in the like from a distance, saying, when God spoke, he said this, not when I spoke because God gave me a word.
Right.
Like, they'll treat the prophetic word that they gave as the very words of God, and not as coming from a fallible individual.
And I think that's true, but that's not, like, that is rare.
These are people with international public platforms that have hundreds of thousands
like
of followers.
Not on a church level.
Yeah.
Necessarily.
So, but
there's a couple questions though.
Yeah.
I'm just interrupting you.
Yeah. No,
because I want to see what they are.
Right.
I need you to scroll up.
Yeah. What do you
There's
want me to scroll
up,
to?
Though.
Up.
There's one further up.
You mean Annette's right there?
You made it. Yeah, that. How do you know when the prophetic word is for you or the church you are in? A public word.
Thanks for reading that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
How do you know?
It's a good question. I mean, well, same things that we've said. First of all, how do you know it's from the Lord? Right? Does it match scripture?
Yeah.
Does the person giving it have credibility?
Yeah,
that's another one too, right? The person who gave the word, have they given a bunch of words? If so, what happened with them? Right? If they all were proven to be false words, then I probably am not going to give this word very much credence. If it's the opposite though, I'm going to listen, right? Like, we listen to people who have credibility. But I think, like, for me, if I hear a word, is it personal? Usually I feel that, like, something in me resonates. That would be where it's a public word, but you feel like the spotlight is on you. Well, then it probably applies to you.
Yeah.
And if it's for the church you're in and it's not personal, it still applies to you, but in a communal sense, right? Insofar as how are you connected to the church, right? If is it a word for where the church is going? Okay, well, as a churchgoer, then how can you support that word? That may mean interceding, praying for the church. It may mean, giving some encouragement to the leadership. If you're in the leadership, then that's going to inform maybe how you look at decisions and stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
What does happen in public words that I think you have to look out for, and again, this is kind of where the credibility thing comes in, but I have, like, many times I've heard leaders, they give the word and I can feel, the word isn't necessarily wrong, but there's really no weight on this. And that usually tells me, like, the word is correct, but it was a personal word for them. And they're trying to apply it to the body when it's not. It's not for everyone. Maybe it's just for them, or maybe it's just for their leadership. Again, I think credibility.
Yeah. Well, and that's a question that, I mean, we could have a whole.
Yeah, it's a good question.
So we'll make note of the question for.
And then
a
is there
episode.
I think Sarah had a question.
Sarah, to Sarah's point there, where she said this, that one there.
The other night.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
So I'll take it down. You go ahead. So
I was reflecting and it pricked my heart how I just want to rush and get my reading done? Do I dread or rush my conversations with the people I love? Why do I do this with Abba? So I've been trying to refocus as I listen to just Abba and his word is spoken to build our relationship.
Yeah, and that's
it's good. Like,
just in response to that too, I mean, there's different ways that I read scripture, right? I generally have 3 set aside times a day for reading scripture, and I do a different type of reading every time that I do that, right? I've got the Bible reading plan. I want to read and read through scripture. I'm not so much thinking that I'm deeply studying a passage or reflecting on what is God saying to me through this passage. I'm familiarizing myself with the stories in scripture so they impact my life, and I have to just read to do that, right?
Yeah.
And so that reading is just, it's just reading. Every now and then I'll jot down a note or something like that, but it is just reading to read. And so I have that set aside time. Then I have my personal reflection time where I'm generally praying through the Psalms. And so I'll go Psalm, once I get through all the Psalms, I'll start all over again at Psalm 1. And so I've done that numerous times, praying through the Psalms. And so that's a much slower process, right? Where I'm sitting there right now I'm stuck again in Psalm 23. And so I've been in Psalm 23 for a couple of days because there's usually a lot of life in there. And so I was reading this morning on, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you're with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And the phrase in that passage stood out to me. I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Right. And so that particular phrase was basically my contemplation for that time reading Psalm 23. But then I also have a time generally set aside where I'm studying the words of Jesus. So all of those times, I'm not saying that those are like extravagantly long times, right? It's maybe 15 minutes to half an hour. So there's different times I set aside to read the Bible differently. And I don't try and throw everything together in one single time, because I know that I'm going to leave wishing I would have done it this way, or wishing I would have done it this way.
And that's why we just need to take time.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And realize there's not a best way to read the Bible.
Right.
All the ways have reading it just like a book.
Right.
Not taking notes, not just reading it.
Yeah.
I think there's tons of value in that.
Yeah, that's right.
You don't have to exegete every passage, though there's a lot of value in that too. Right.
And that's a discipline for me to not do that, because I'll be like, I'll really want to, right? And so I actually have to restrain myself to read it.
You're just trying to brag about how smart you are.
No, it's a real problem. So with all that said, that's some of my thoughts in terms of that. With all that said, just revisiting some of the principles, second guessing yourself. Second guessing yourself is okay. Holding what the Father says loosely and allowing other people to weigh in on that is a good thing. But at the same time, that should not breed confusion.
No, and I think if it's second guessing, that's good. If second guessing is actually because you have a lot of self-doubt, that's something different. And then I would say there's a spot for healing there. Yeah. That's an invitation for freedom. And so, you could pursue that as well and ask the Lord to come into that space. That's right. And that's probably what he's speaking to you about, right?
Familiarize yourself with scripture.
Yeah.
Because God speaks in specific ways in scripture. And it's not so much that you can find a one-for-one verbatim, that's what he said, but you can find the principles of who he is and how he speaks through scripture. And that's more of that's a broader range of understanding his voice, not he spoke like this in that particular time, so that's what he always sounds like. No, he gives us instruction for how it'll go well with us, and he draws us closer to him. Yeah. Those are generally the principles that we see. And it's good and healthy to ask for and wait for confirmation. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, those are great. Nothing wrong with that. You don't have to get it right away. Like praying into a word is that's wisdom. Yeah. Those are great points. Okay, before we wrap up, I just want to invite all of you guys that are watching to check out the new event that we have coming up, January 21 and 22. I think it's 20 and 21. It's a Friday and Saturday. It's one of those two. There's a link in the description of the video. The event is all geared around being people of peace in the midst of an anxiety-riddled world. And what does it look like to become a person of peace?
Mhm.
And how do we do that? And in what ways do we break patterns and cycles
Yeah.
that are based on early wounds, that are based on family of origin, that kind of stuff, that help us to become people that have the gravitas to impact the people around us,
Yeah.
because the Spirit's with us. And so that's coming up. We've got our good friend Murray Dewick. He'll be on with me, and this is going to be a Zoom webinar. And then we also have a newcomer to the stuff that we do, which he's an old comer to us because he's an old friend.
Yeah, we've known him for a while.
A family marriage therapist named Ron Huxley, who's quite an expert in his field on childhood trauma. And
yeah, from what I understand, he specializes in working with blended families and adoption.
Yeah. So he really understands how.
He's been in this field for a couple decades at least. If not
probably
more.
longer than that.
He's got a ton of wisdom in that area.
So
and
Ron,
he's a thorough believer in the Lord.
Yeah, that's right.
Right, really
that's
solid.
Right.
In his relationship with Jesus.
I love Ron.
Him and his wife have spoken really like so much wisdom into our lives.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure, yeah. So Ron will be around this Zoom 2-day Zoom webinar with Murray Dewick and Ron Huxley, and it's going to be a fantastic time together. So there's a link in the description for registration for that, and all those videos will be made available. If you can register, and then if you can't watch all the sessions and be with us for all the sessions, but there'll be times of live Q&A, there'll be times of teaching, there'll be dialogue, that kind of stuff. So it's going to be lots of fun. So check out the link there. Becoming a non-anxious presence, which is not my original language, but it's a language I really like.
Yeah.
Becoming a non-anxious presence. So with that said, it's been a great live stream. We'll be back next week, given that we can arrange someone to watch our children because of the difficulties with school and all that now. And we will see you guys next time. God bless.
Yeah, bless you. Bye.
Bye.